Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa, and you're watching Rappler's continuing coverage of the 2025 national and local elections. You have 68.4 million Filipinos registered to vote, voting for 18,320 different elections. At 5 a.m. today, the polls opened for priority groups. Senior citizens, persons with disabilities, and those who are pregnant were allowed to vote early. Now the polls are open to all age groups. Filipinos are lining up and voting at polling precincts all over the country. We know that President Marcos cast his vote in Batak, Ilocos Norte, the stronghold of the Marcoses, while Vice President Sara Duterte also voted in the south, in Davao City. There's a place to check out all the information you need for the elections. Visit Rappler's election site at ph.rappler.com. We have updates, profiles of candidates for the Senate and local races, even your party list groups. Make out your códigos. Later today, you can also access partial and unofficial results from that same site. In the studio with me now are Rappler columnist John Neri and Rappler digital forensics researcher Pauline Macaraig. But first, let's go to a voter from San Jose, Batangas, who has advice to give to young voters. Let's listen to senior citizen Arlinda.
May papayo ko nga ay pumili ng kandidato na magdadala sa kanila sa mabuti. Hindi yung sa masama ang lagi ang nasa sa isip. Kaya gagabay sa kanila kung sakali at sila ay magkaroon ng problema, malalapitan nila at makakagabay sa kanila.
Iya Gozum covers local races in Marikina. She filed this report earlier today from SSS Village Elementary School.
Nandito tayo ngayon sa SSS Village Elementary School dito sa Marikina City kung saan mahigit 18,400 voters ang inaasahan na bumoto ngayong Lunes. So nagbukas ang polling place na ito 5 a.m. pa lang for the priority groups. Kasama dyan yung mga PWD, senior citizens, and pregnant women. And this school has been open for vote for the general public since 7 a.m. hanggang 7 p.m. ito bukas. So far, according sa mga volunteers na nakausap natin dito, smooth sailing naman yung pagboto ng mga tao dito. Mahaba yung mga pila, meron mga holding areas to contain the crowd. But yes, so far, smooth sailing naman. Yan ang sabi sa atin ng mga volunteers dito. Pagpasok sa school, merong kaagad locator map for the voters para makita kung saan sila boboto. So, pagpasok dito sa school, pagpasok dito sa SSS, merong tent dito na merong locator map para mag-guide yung mga voters kung saan sila pupunta, kung saan presinto sila pupunta to vote. If you're not sure kung saan ka boboto, dito sa gym, merong mga volunteers, may medical assistance desk dito, merong assistance desk for people who are not sure where to go. Ayan. So, holding area din itong gym dito sa loob ng SSS Elementary School, no, for those waiting sa mga kasama nila. Ayan. And then, beside the gym, nandito rin merong guide dito. If you know kung ano na yung presinto mo, you go here to check kung anong building. Ayan. So, we can see, people checking kung saang building, saang location yung presinto para kung saan sila boboto. So, dito sa Marikina City, there are 315,000 registered voters. Ayan. So, during the campaign season, Mariqueños are made to choose between Team Bagong Marikina and Team Marikina City. Basically, new versus old. There are tight races here in the city. Political couples Kimbos versus political couple Chodoros. So for the mayoral post, si Congresswomen Stella Kimbo and Maan Teodoro are fighting for the mayoral post. And then tight race then for 1st District Representative post. Ang naglalaban dyan si Senator Coco Pimentel and outgoing suspended Marikina Mayor Marcy Teodoro. So dito rin pala sa SSS Elementary School, dito natin inaasahang boboto later ang Kimbo couple, si Stella and Miro Kimbo later. Kanina rin we're at Leo de Gario Victorino Elementary School kung saan bumoto maaga-maaga no, si Senator Coco Pimentel with his wife Catherine Yu Pimentel, the special envoy to UAE. Kanina nakausap natin si Senator Coco Pimentel. He refused to comment on his chances versus Marcy Teodoro and just told reporters na he's just happy for Philippine democracy for this election day. So there were less crowds at Leo de Gracia kung saan bumoto si Senator Coco compared dito sa SSS Elementary School. Although kumakapal na yung crowd dito sa SSS Elementary School, the volunteers say na hindi pa ito yung peak. Konti pa lang actually itong nakikita nating mga tao dito. They're expecting siguro later pa, mas dumami pa, no, since kabubukas pa lang naman ng polling place. So, just a reminder for the public, para po sa mga boboto, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. po bukas ang mga presinto. And for more updates, for more election updates, you can head on over to Rappler Communities app or check out our social media pages. Ayun pa lang muna for now. We're waiting for the Kimbo couple to cast their votes here. We'll post more updates when they do. Again, I'm Iya Gozum, Rappler, Marikina City.
In the studio with me now are Rappler columnist John Neri and Rappler digital forensics researcher Pauline Macareig. John has written a lot about the public surveys ahead of these elections. What do they show?
First, let me quote what a candidate for the Senate wrote on his Facebook, I think over the weekend. Luke Espiritu said, "Let us end the tyranny of surveys." We can understand his frustration, but I think as journalists and as citizens, we can actually make good use of scientifically sound surveys. So I will limit my remarks to just the four survey organizations, which I think are doing really sound work. SWS, Pulse Asia, Okta Research, and WR Numero Research. I think what we're looking at here is mixed results. I think that maybe at the senatorial level, we're looking at 8 to 9 seats for President Marcos's Senate slate. And then the rest will be either Duterte candidates or 1 or 2 independents, which actually is par for the course. Except for 1 year, 2007, all the midterm elections or all the elections that have taken place within a presidential term have all been favorable for the incumbent president. So in this case, we've seen this film before.
Yeah.
Which means that there will be no death blow delivered either to the Marcos dynasty or to the Duterte dynasty. In the Filipino tradition of muddling through, I think we will have the next 3 years to resolve this titanic struggle between the Marcoses and the Dutertes.
What makes these elections different, though? Why are they important?
Are they important? Yeah.
Good.
No, I voted this morning, and I heard someone explain the absence of her husband from the voting center, and she said, "Well, he doesn't want to vote anymore." Of course, it's anecdotal and so on. So there is a sentiment. I think I don't know how to quantify that, but I think there is a sentiment where people say, "Bakit pa ako boboto? Pareho lang naman, di ba?" I mean. If you this morning you were able to see the ambag clips that we ran, I mean we can really see that people know exactly what they need at their level. So the question needs to be asked: why do we elect politicians, leaders who are not in a position to deliver on those specific things, right? So I can understand why maybe
we do
there's...
know why they're elected, right? Since 1986, we've been talking, and before that,
yes.
Guns, Goons, Gold, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so it's what adds now to the complication would be more disinformation, right? Which, say Pauline, they've studied that.
Yeah.
Some of us may misunderstand how much agency we may have entering the voting booth. Now we think, I've made up my mind, but maybe part of our mind has been made up by disinformation.
So perfect segue, Pauline. How much
Right.
agency do we have? What are you seeing on social media today, and then the context of it?
All right. So today, mostly we're seeing reports of vote buying in several parts of the country. That's including Nueva Ecija, Negros Oriental, even Quezon City, Cavite, and Parañaque. But we've been tracking actually online conversations for years now. Yeah. And
Wait, I will say 2016 was critical for us in
Yeah.
Rappler, because that's, when you get targeted, you don't have to ask anyone for the data. You see all the data. So, yeah. So we've been tracking it for years.
That's
what have
how
we
we
found?
started. Yeah. What we've seen actually during these elections, I can say that the online landscape, it reflects the political developments. My case study here is the pro-China narratives in the Philippines. So we studied that throughout the years, and we saw that the pro-China communities were largely made up of pro-Duterte and pro-Marcos supporters. But that was before they split up. And it's interesting because Sir John actually mentioned that when pro-Duterte and pro-Marcos camps, they have their own bets now, right? But before that, they together were sharing, they were discussing pro-China narratives. But right now, we're seeing that as President Marcos is pivoting to the U.S., the pro-China community has shrunk.
Yes.
And so only pro-Duterte supporters remain. And so this also kind of translates into how, your senatorial bets are campaigning right now, because the Duterte-aligned candidates, for example, Bato de la Rosa and Senator Bongo, they're still aligning themselves with former President Duterte, and they're capitalizing on the strong supporter base of Duterte. In contrast, the Marcos Alianza bets, they have a various behavior on Facebook. But what we've been seeing is that both the supporters for the Duterte camp and the Marcos camp, they're both wary of Senator Amy Marcos, because they mentioned that she was part of this group before, but right now she's being endorsed by Vice President Sara Duterte. In contrast, we've also seen opposition bets. For example, for example, Bam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan. What we've noticed is that online they've been campaigning based on their platforms, and it's been hardworking for them, to say the least.
Hardworking meaning it's been successful for them? No.
In terms of engagement,
Okay.
average engagement per post, they gathered high average engagement.
Does engagement translate, though?
Yes. That's
another thing.
that's another thing. Yeah, I guess we'll see
Right.
after this election.
Right.
So yeah, that's what we've been seeing so far in the online landscape.
John, what's been the impact of the arrest of our former president and his quick spiriting to The Hague?
I think we can speak of a sympathy vote generated by the arrest. I want to make a distinction first. People have said, some of the analysts I've talked to have said that we need to separate Bongo's trajectory from Bato de la Rosa's and the other politicians, the other senators in the Duterte slate, because he's been laying the pipeline for his malasakit brand for a long time. And I think that's true. But I think he might not be topping the surveys now. He might be in the top 3 or 4, if not for the arrest. I think Bato de la Rosa 3 months ago was among those na peligroso. No? He was in the anywhere between 9 and 13 or 14. No? He would be fighting with some really moneyed candidates for the last seat. But now he's, I think, 4 or 5.
Yes.
So pretty safe. Then also, there has been an upsurge in voter preference for the other Duterte candidates, Jimmy Bondoc, Philip Salvador, mostly in Mindanao. So there has been that.
But it
surge.
seemed to be waning with the SWS with the most recent survey, right? Like they were much higher at the end of April versus now. Is that correct?
Yes, so maybe there was a window for it.
Right.
Maybe the arrest happened too early, quote unquote, for it to have a real impact on, for instance, Philip Salvador,
Yes.
who was threatening to make it to the top 12, but I think now he's like 15
Yes.
or something. Or Marcoleta would be another case. But so I think we can make a case that there was a sympathy vote, and certainly the Dutertes have not been, they've made the most of this, right?
Yes.
They've created
Exploited,
this
you could say.
from day one, right?
Yeah.
We've tracked that, right? On Rappler from day one of the arrest. They've been pushing this image of Duterte as a victim,
Exactly.
and also
old man.
as an old man, as the victim of Western powers,
Yes,
and
yes.
the sort of thing.
Us
And
against,
again, it's hard to say whether people will see that as that, or they might really appreciate that as disinformation.
Yes. In terms of rule of law, right? Like internationally, I've been talking about how the arrest of former President Duterte is actually, as America moves away from its international agreements, the Philippines went ahead and is coming back to a multilateral system. But rule of law, how important is the law coming from 6 years of Duterte, 3 years of Marcos?
Let me put on my other hat here. I also serve on the board of the World Justice Project, which produces the Rule of Law Index. And I
Yes.
think we've
You
seen
sit on the
that-
board of the
That's
World
right, yeah.
Justice.
And I think we've seen that since, is it 2016 or so, there has been what we call a rule of law recession. Factors have been declining. And I think now, when the new Rule of Law Index comes out in October, we'll see it. How the effect on the Rule of Law Index of what's happening in the U.S. right now. So the international context is actually more right-wing presence.
More
right.
Duterte, right? Like
More
pushing.
Duterte.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
There has been some pushback. I mean, for instance, Canada, Australia, they
As a
voted
reaction
as
to-
a reaction. That's right.
to
yeah.
President Trump.
I'm very happy to. I'm very willing to engage in conversations to discuss the election of Pope Leo the Great as, in a way, also a reaction to what's happening in the United States. So there is some pushback, and the arrest of Duterte. It's one of those anomalies. I don't think any one of us expected in 2022 when Bongbong Marcos won that this would happen. But things happen in politics, so they had a parting of ways.
But you look disappointed. Isn't that a good thing?
No. I wanted to calibrate my emotions
okay.
because this is happening under a President Marcos Jr.
Exactly.
And, we
Ironic.
lived through the martial law era. But I have also written that Marcos Jr. I think understands that the full rehabilitation of the Marcos family name runs through the capitals of the Western world. Now he has to make a good showing in not only in Washington D.C. but in Paris, in London, and so I think when this opportunity arose, or this problem arose for him, should we arrest Duterte? Should we allow the Interpol to arrest him? I think he decided, okay, in the end, we'll go with that. But it's happened. I mean, now it's out of his hands, actually. That is a good thing. That is a good thing. Will that have an impact on Duterte running for mayor?
That's fascinating,
That's
right? He's at The Hague in
right.
detention,
That's right.
waiting for his trial,
That's right.
and yet
And we have this stupid legal tradition where if you run for office and then you're charged with something, your victory would be a condonation.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah.
of course, it won't affect the case in the ICC, but people still think that way.
Okay, right now, let's take a short break here. Let's go to Dwight De Leon. He's at a precinct in San Pablo, Laguna, where gubernatorial aspirant Sol Aragones is set to cast her ballot. Dwight, what can you tell us?
Yes, hello, Maria. Nakapasok lang ni former Congresswoman Sol Aragones dito sa isa sa mga classrooms dito sa San Lucas 1 Elementary School. Higit isang oras na siyang nakapila dito sa eskwelang to. Maraming nakapilang mga botante dahil gusto nilang bumoto ngayong 2025 election. Kanina nakausap natin ng saglit si former Congresswoman Sol. Meron siyang secured siya this time. May calculated sense of confidence. She talked about how different she ran this campaign for the gubernatorial race kumpara noong 2022. Remember, noong 2022, former Congresswoman Sol also tried to clinch the gubernatorial post but lost by more than 200,000 votes. It was still a strong showing for the former Congresswoman, but it was not enough to unseat the longtime governor of the province, Governor Ramil Hernandez, who at the time was seeking his third and final term. Siya ay nakakuha ng higit 850,000 votes in that election. Sabi rin kanina ng mga nakausap nating staff ni former Congresswoman Sol ay kumpara noong nakaraan, nakapaglibot-libot si former Congresswoman sa maraming bayan, lungsod ng Laguna kumpara noong 2022 kung saan nagdeklara lamang si former Congresswoman Sol ng kanyang kandidatura less than a year heading to election day. Maliban pa doon, kasi katulad nga ng sinabi ko, mahaba yung pila dito sa San Lucas 1 Elementary School. It's because, marami yung mga botante. At the same time, yung mga senior citizens, medyo matagal bumoto kumpara sa mga regular voters. So, yun yung isa sa mga realities na kailangan nating i-consider for election day. So sa mga pipila, konting tiyaga, konting pasensya dahil may mga botante na talagang takes them longer time to vote. At the same time, Maria, may isang presinto dito na nagkaroon ng kaunting aberya sa automated counting machine earlier today. Sabi ng mga nakausap natin, yung machine nire-reject yung balota multiple times. So they had to call in a DESO technical support staff na mabilis namang masikaso kung kaya't na-fix yung machine. Although, still, it took some voters, nakausap natin, it took them more than 2 hours. 6 a.m. pa sila nandito, but it took them around 8:30 a.m. before they were able to cast their ballot. Later, we're hoping to interview former Congresswoman Sol Aragones more to talk about how confident she is on election day and if she has any regrets running this campaign. Aside from a congresswoman or former Congresswoman Sol, may tatlo siyang kalaban for the gubernatorial race here in Laguna. Si Santa Rosa, Laguna Congressman Dan Fernandez, we know him as one of the faces of the House Quad Committee investigating the anomalies that took place under the administration of former President Rodrigo Duterte. He is in Santa Rosa casting his ballot. He was scheduled to cast his ballot around 9 a.m. although I'm not sure if mahaba rin ba yung pila sa Santa Rosa. Kaninang around 5:30 a.m. we were told that Vice Governor Karen Agapay was also set to cast her ballot in one of the schools here in San Pablo. Vice Governor Karen is also from the same locality as Sol Aragones. So in terms of bailiwick, yun yung isa sa mga question marks, because ang labanan dito sa Laguna, labanan ng Baluarte yan, Maria. Si Ruth Hernandez is from Calamba, is from Bayo, so she is expected to be strong in the second district. Dan Fernandez is expected to be competitive in Santa Rosa, pero itong San Pablo, itong third district, parehas nandito si Vice Governor Karen Agapay at saka si former Congresswoman Sol Aragones. So the question is, mahati ba yung boto dito sa San Pablo at sa third district? At the same time, may iba pang congressional districts up for grabs. For example, yung Binyan, yung first district, yung fourth district of Laguna. So yun yung aabangan natin heading to the canvassing, pag-closing of polls later. We were told that the Sol Aragones staff is expecting results around 10 p.m. today. So we're going to check if mabilis nga yung magiging bilangan at saka canvassing ng mga balota dito sa probinsya ng Laguna. Maria.
Dwight, you talked a little bit about a potential problem with one of the machines. I mean, ito yung pinakaunang beses na ginagamit natin itong mga machines na to, di ba? I mean,
Yes.
since 2010, the Philippines was on Smartmatic, di ba? Tell us, what was it like with the new voting machines from South Korea?
Actually, that's a very ambitious project by the Commission on Elections. Remember, before I was assigned to cover the Calabarzon beat for the 2025 elections, I've been a long-time reporter of the Commission on Elections. And yung Smartmatic, although in past elections, according to watchdogs, wala naman silang nakitang major anomalies when it came to the election results. We had the random manual audit and other layers of checks to make sure that the votes were accurately counted. There's still the sense na kailangan ng palitan yung mga makina because the machines that we used in 2022 were already, if I'm not mistaken, 6 years old at that time. So by the 2025 elections, isang dekada na yung tanda ng machine. So they're obsolete and they really needed to be replaced. Although, ang pumalit is Miru. We wrote numerous pieces about this. Miru has a string of controversies abroad. It has a blemished reputation. It is known for supplying election machines in countries that are how do you call it? Yung mga bansang underdeveloped, developing countries. Sorry, yung mga developing countries. So doon sila nagsusupply ng machines at may mga kontrobersiya doon sa mga bansang ngayon. Although the Commission on Elections has repeatedly stated that they got certifications from those countries. They are confident about these machines, and even though heading to election day, heading to the election season, pinutakte rin ng maraming kontrobersiya ang Miru. May petition that was filed with the Supreme Court calling for more documents. I think it was the group of Malumangahas Right to Know Right Now coalition. They were saying that they needed more documents to ensure that transparent yung kontrata, transparent yung entire procurement process, because Miru didn't really have a competitor for the bidding of contracts. Smartmatic wanted to bid for that election contract worth billions of pesos. If I'm not mistaken, 17.9 billion pesos. But Smartmatic was disqualified from bidding for the project and for future Philippine elections in connection with its alleged involvement in the bribery scheme in 2016 involving former COMELEC chairman Andres Bautista. It is a case that is being investigated in the United States. And if I'm not mistaken, former COMELEC chairman Andres Bautista was already indicted in the United States. Maria.
Thank you, Dwight. John, I mean, how interesting, right? We switched voting machines because of what's going on in the United States. How intertwined is the Philippines and the United States right now?
Well, you did say earlier in the earlier broadcast, you're looking at the Philippinization of American politics, and this might be an example. It's always been the other way around, right? I mean, we've always tracked. We've always followed the United States, but this time around, maybe it's the other way around. There are emerging and I think credible allegations that there might have been voter fraud in the United States on a massive scale. I don't know. I mean, that it's just, I think I only read it 2 or 3 days ago. So that's something that's worth looking into. But I don't know whether it will, if there's anything there.
Well, on Smartmatic, actually, Smartmatic did win the case and then won the damages of it. No? Is that what you're nodding your head, Pauline? On Smartmatic. Yes. Oh, and then Dwight just said that. I guess the question is, did Smartmatic do anything wrong in the Philippines? And shifting, do these machines, will there be any effect on our elections?
On the level of the individual voter, I think that the current machines that we have are more voter friendly. There's a paper trail that you can check before you leave the booth. So that would be an advantage. But we still have to see whether, the votes that will be transmitted, the tallies that transmitted later will actually reflect. So I plan to go back, for instance, to my own voting precinct this afternoon to see, what the vote totals are, and then maybe later on to compare that. So on that point, the jury is still out on this. But on the level of the individual voter, I thought it was very voter friendly.
How long did it take you to vote?
Altogether, 20 minutes, but the actual voting was maybe less than
Relatively
5.
quick. And then Sol, Dwight just said that the former Congresswoman Aragones took an hour on the line and then time to vote. Pauline, leading up to elections, I mean, let's pick up the Duterte arrest.
Right.
What happened after Duterte was arrested online, and how did it impact reality?
It was almost immediately that we saw disinformation narratives resurfacing. I say resurfacing because we've seen the narratives before, like, that the war on drugs was done by Duterte but, to save the country from criminals, stuff like that. And then we also saw narratives, as Sir John mentioned earlier, portraying former President Duterte as someone frail, old, because of his old age. So what happened to him was very, he didn't deserve that. That's what they were saying. So it kind of...
Also the kidnapping, right?
Exactly, the
kidnapping
kidnapping narrative. That, it was... that nobody knew where he was being taken. And this was really propagated by his own camp. Remember, his daughter, Titi Duterte. She was very popular during that time.
Yes.
Online. Yeah.
Also, she was on the plane.
Yeah.
Headed there, right?
Yeah.
And she was, but there was so much written at that time that this was illegal, that that they should have done anything more. I mean, was the arrest legal? Were there things that should have been done differently?
I think the case can be made for both. The Philippine government has certainly said, they just followed protocol when it came to allowing the Interpol to serve an arrest warrant. But we also did see that it was the Police General Torre who actually ended up effecting the arrest. I think at a certain point, like 12 hours into the stay in Villamor Air Base, he called it and said, "Okay, it's time." Right. So I have also seen pieces written by lawyers, Filipino lawyers, saying that we've skipped a step. It should have been handed down by a court and so on. So there are those two things. But the kidnapping narrative is disinformation because we could all see, what was happening.
Yes.
It wasn't true that we didn't know what was happening to him. That he, in the end, he gave his consent when he was met on the plane by the arresting officers. At first, he said, he was resisting, but eventually he decided to follow. So we could all see that. Right? It wasn't like he was resisting them, fighting.
Yeah.
And then also when it was finally time to take him to the plane bound for The Hague, people could also see through some of the videos that his own daughter, for instance, shared, that it wasn't in fact, him. Maybe it was against his will, yes, but not. He wasn't resisting it. It wasn't a kidnapping. The people who were bringing him there, were known, were identified.
Yes.
So, but the kidnapping narrative really stuck. People thought, wow, if you can do that to a president,
Which brings us
the
back.
very same question people asked when he was killing people left and right during his presidential term, right?
Due process.
Due process.
Right? But I guess, so Kitty Duterte wasn't on the plane after all, right? She was getting the video.
In Villamor Air Base.
Yeah, she was in Villamor Air Base. So I guess, what's the impact of this now? Because for a while, in March for sure, the Philippines was actually a hopeful place in the sense of rule of law, right? You mentioned now there's a rolling back of this.
Yeah. So I think it really is out of the hands of the Philippine government now. It's up to the International Criminal Court to decide whether the objections raised by Duterte's lawyers have any ground to them. We're looking at the next hearing will be open to the public, I think, in September. Right?
Yeah.
Which will be, I don't know, there's also a different timeline that we have to also track here, and that is the impeachment of the incumbent vice president. So that's also another factor. But as far as the ICC is concerned, I think that whatever we do, so Amy Marcos tried to do a lot with her Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearings, right? And after one hearing, she comes out with a preliminary report, finding the usual suspects guilty and so on. But that will have an impact only on Philippine politics, but not on what will actually happen to Duterte. So even if he wins, for instance, as mayor of Davao City again, I don't think he can serve. I mean, how will that work? So that one is isolated from Philippine politics. But Sara Duterte's endorsement has been much sought after, especially by Mindanao politicians. So that's a consideration.
The popularity of Duterte. I mean, Dwight or Jairo has written about the magic of Duterte, despite the killings. Despite the killings, he could still win.
Yes, but I think that maybe you also have something that you've tracked, no? But I think that Duterte is not an anomaly in that sense. No? I think that we like our political leaders to be malakas. In Duterte's case, it's the extreme case, right? He will tell you to your face that he's killed kidnappers and so on, right? And that's the sort of bravado that many of us are looking for. That's my guy. I feel safer. Maybe because we live in an unsafe place.
But it's also used by President Trump in the United States, right? Bringing, raising fear.
Although he's a fake tough guy. I mean, Duterte is a real tough guy. I mean, the things that he said he's done. And I think the late Rene Sagisaga said we should have stopped him when he was accused of killing someone when he was a law student.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
Pauline, what do you have?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the conversation about the Dutertes, why they're very so strong. You said that they're still popular despite the killings. I think the reason why their supporters love them so much, it's not despite the killings, it's because of the killings, because they believe that's what's needed here in the Philippines, based on what we see online. So basically, that's where social media comes in, because that's where the algorithms push information on their feed, and so their beliefs are further reinforced, and so that's where the kind of invasive manipulation comes in, because if you keep on seeing, if you're being fed those kinds of information over and over again, then you tend to really believe and hold on to those beliefs.
I'm going to come back to both of you on the impact of online violence in the real world, not just in the Philippines, but also in other parts of the world. Let's go now to Iya Gozom, who's live from Marikina. Iya, what is it like there now?
Maria?
Can you hear me? Can you hear
me? Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so what's it like there now? It looks like looks relatively quiet. Tell us.
Yeah, in this hallway. Nandito tayo ngayon sa SSS Village Elementary School. The lines are long, pero in the hallway, kung nasaan ako, hindi masyado. It looks light. It's 10:42 a.m. We're expecting, according to volunteers, around 18,400 voters here out of the 315,000 registered voters here in Marikina City. So nandito tayo ngayon sa SSS Elementary School because we're waiting for Marikina mayoral candidate Stella Kimbo and the former House lawmaker Miro Kimbo to cast their votes. So currently ngayon, nasa holding center si Stella Kimbo and her husband Miro Kimbo is, I think, nakapila right now. So kanina nasa Leodegario Elementary School tayo where we covered Senator Coco Pimentel who casted his vote very early with his wife, Katrina U. Pimentel. So, dito sa Marikina City, tight ang races, the mayoral post, ang magkalaban dyan, si Stella Kimbo and the wife of outgoing and suspended Marikina Mayor, Marcy Teodoro, his wife, Maan Teodoro. And for the first district representative, ang magkalaban naman dyan ay si Senator Coco Pimentel and Marcy Teodoro himself. So, yun na muna yung updates ngayon from here. Maria, so far smooth sailing naman yung pagboto dito sa SSS. Maraming tao but the lines are moving. Medyo nagtatagal lang when they're waiting at the holding areas. But once inside the rooms, mabilis na lang ang pagboto. Maria.
Salamat, Iya. Thank you so much. Keep us updated. That's an interesting one, right? And you mentioned this a little bit earlier. Filipino values. Ano ba talaga yun? What are Filipinos voting for now?
I think at the ground level, I think we are voting for very specific improvements in our community. No? For instance, in Laguna, I think the issue is the lack of a public hospital, right? So people have seen that, and people want to make that an election issue, right? In Bulacan, it would be water. No? So I mean, these are real life problems. I think on that level, I think we know what we want, but I've raised this earlier, are we voting for the right kind of leaders who will make good on that? Ang tingin kasi natin is, babalik ako doon. No? So I'm borrowing this concept from this historian, si Mina Roses, who talks of kinship politics. And ang tingin niya, Philippine politics is really labanan ng malakas at mahina. Ang gusto mo yung malakas. Okay, why? Partly because we're not that thoroughly modern yet, and we need a padrino.
Yes.
We need a padrino just to
Patronage.
be able to get a hospital bed.
Yeah.
For instance, in a public hospital.
Yeah.
Yan ang gusto natin na, okay, kailangan natin public hospital, pero pag may nangyari sa anak ko, gusto ko makakausap yung isang politiko who can get me that hospital bed or the medicine that I need and so on. So so ang tingin nila, kung kayang gawin nun ng politiko, malakas yan. No? Yung hindi kayang gawin, puro salita lang, mahina. Parang ganyan. And take a look at so it's not name recall alone. No? If we take a look at our Senate races, you have Ping Lacson, right?
Yeah.
You have Bato de la Rosa.
Yeah.
You have the Tulfo brothers.
Yes.
We're looking at the possibility of having 3 brothers in the Senate, right?
Yes.
Lahat may mga macho image. Yung parang talaga na kung kailangan mo, these are the people to go to. And then si Bongo nga, yung malasakit centers. Meron talaga. So ang hinahabol so I don't know whether this is a Filipino value, but I think it's a very practical need. No, I want to vote for someone na malakas enough to give me what I need when I need it.
Patronage, though, right? That's patronage.
Definitely patronage.
Did we
politics.
ever get out of patronage, feudalistic politics?
No, I think that's what's very interesting. Also, with what's happening in Pasig City, for instance, right?
Yes.
I think Vico Soto is
Explain
at the
that.
very same time doing the work that needs to be done, is also explaining his work.
Yeah.
Right? He's saying, hindi nyo kailangan magpasalamat sa akin.
Yes.
That's not my money. I'm just doing my job, right?
Yes.
Unfortunately, you go to Quezon City. I mean, the Belmontes have done well, but you can see the B sign for Sunny B, right?
Yes,
you go to Makati, you can see the B. I mean, so now they mistake. So Vico Soto is actually one of the new generation of politicians who are educating
and who are
their
fighting, trying to fight
Yeah,
corruption,
yeah.
right? So based on that, let's go to JC Gotinko, who's at the polling station. Pasig mayoral candidate Sara Diskaya who is going against Vico Soto, just voted a few minutes ago. What was it like when she came to the polling precinct, JC?
Well, Maria, she's become an overnight celebrity in a sense because she's going against Vico Soto. So just by virtue of that, she gained attention to herself. There was a rather large scrum of media here. There were vloggers with her, and she even during the ambush interview that she gave after she voted, she called them my vloggers. Sabi niya, mga vlogger ko, right? And it just goes to show what kind of communication strategy she employed. And then there are the mainstream media. All the major networks were represented here. Rappler, of course, is here too. We got the opportunity to finally ask her the question we've long been wanting to ask her, that if she does become mayor and when she does begin, carrying out her promised infrastructure projects, will St. Gerard participate in them? She said no, because it's against the law. She hit the right notes there. That's the correct answer there. But she's also very well aware that Soto is very popular. So one of the questions she was asked is, what are her expectations? Is she ready to shake the hand of whomever wins? And she did say, may the best man win. I don't know how deliberate she was in her wording, but she's definitely, she's being dignified, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, a lot of the people I spoke with here while waiting for her to arrive, I try to talk to people and get a feel of what their sentiments are. And it's mostly Vico Soto or Giting ng Pasig that they say they're going to vote for. One man whom I just spoke with before I came on here, I asked him, so whom did you vote for? He said, wow, sir, everyone's eyes, lahat ng mata nandito sa Pasig, no, ng buong bansa. O nga po, sir, sino po bang napusuan nyo? And then he said, isa lang ang sasabihin ko dyan, nasa kama ka na ba, babalik ka pa ba sa banig? So the sources we've spoken to here all say that Sara Vizcaya has been employing trapo tactics, ayuda, the big billboards, street concerts, a blitz of wealth shared with the people, to put it bluntly, while Soto has been campaigning only with like monoblock chairs huddled in street corners, no stage. He uses a mic with one speaker. Even at his meeting the Avance on Saturday night, it was just, a basic stage. The program was short. To illustrate my point, Vizcaya's meeting the Avance started way before Soto's began, and it ended way after Soto's began. Soto's and meeting the Pasig's meeting the Avance was straight to the point. They just enumerated their platforms. There was no singing, no dancing, save for one councilor candidate who sang a song, but besides that, it was straight to business. Maria.
Will Vico's tactics work, do you think? Are the voters mature enough? How interesting, kama to the banig.
Nasa kama ka na, babalik ka pa ba sa banig? If we're going to look at the crowds at the meeting de Avance, Vizcaya pulled out all the stops. There was an LED stage. She had Andrew E., Tom Rodriguez, several other singers and rappers. But her crowd was not as large as the one at the Giting ng Pasig sortie. We cannot say there were no celebrities. Soto himself is a celebrity. His mom and dad are A-list actors, Vic Soto and Connie Reyes. Tito Soto was there. Soto himself, I can't say whether was he campaigning for Vico, or did Vico give him the favor of letting him campaign on his stage? But Angelou De Leon, who was a popular actress in the 90s, still an active actress today, is running for re-election as a councilor. So there was star power too. But the crowd at Soto's meeting the Avance was just, I'd have to say, given the drone shots, I have not received official counts, but just looking at the footage, it was a lot larger. And again, speaking to people on the ground, I have honestly, of all the people I've spoken with here, have not heard one say that they're going to vote for Vizcaya.
So interesting. When you look at the entire country, the poverty incidence rate is at 15.5%, but Metro Manila is significantly lower with an average of 1.5%. But the second highest poverty incidence rate is actually in Pasig, JC.
Yes.
So what has Vico Soto done as the incumbent?
Let's start with, there's this thing called the Pamaskong Handog. It's symbolic. It's once a year, but it's basically a Noche Buena package. But now every single household, every single family in Pasig now receives every Christmas, which didn't happen before. There are regular cash assistance packages for senior citizens. They receive, if I am not mistaken, 3,000 in the middle of the year and 3,000 pesos again at Christmas. And then there's a regular 500 pesos for senior citizens who are registered with the City Hall office designated for them. There's also regular as cash assistance to solo parents. And from what I heard during campaigns, the Soto administration is also working on giving regular cash assistance to persons with disability. Other things is that it's the local government bringing down the prices of transacting with it. So at the market, at the public market, stalls are now cheaper. One concessionaire said they used to pay 2,500 for a stall. Now it's down to 990 pesos. Tricycle franchises are now free. I remember that used to be a problem because many who were wanting to be tricycle drivers could not afford the franchise, and so they went rogue. They were, as we call it, colloquially, colorum. But now they have franchises because it's free. You don't have to pay for a franchise. Also, the ambulant vendors, the ones who sell fish balls and pares and isaw, they were registered with the city. So now you can see here their carts have a number and are painted with the blue and white, the signature blue and white of the Soto administration. And there's also, it's been officialized, shall we say. And then another thing is at City Hall itself, you know, a long-standing problem in local governments and perhaps even in the national government is that the government itself cannot regularize its own workers. Many are coterminous, many have contracts that are limited and are subject to the whims of whoever is the incumbent. Now what Soto did, because of cleaning up the procurement process, saving money and all of that, is that he was able to regularize, if I'm not mistaken, 70%. But for sure, a majority of the city government's workers are now tenured. And besides the fact that according to Soto, it's only fair and it only complies with labor laws of the country, it also insulates them from politics. So it makes them now not so beholden to whoever is the incumbent power. Maria.
Interesting. JC, thank you so much. That's JC Gotinga from Pasig. Keep us updated. John!
That's terrific, right? I mean, so the idea that an incumbent mayor will give up a source, a base of support by converting contractuals and job order employees into regular employees,
as in
meaning isolating them from himself. I mean, wow, that's so he's really doing something in Pasig that we should all be watching. Unfortunately I say, because this is his third term.
Yes.
So we don't know what will happen 3 years from now. But he was able to, with savings, with the lack of corruption, I think raise his budget from something like 10 billion when he came in 2019 to something like 22 billion. He's more than doubled the amount of money that he makes. He can now make available for Pasig City services.
We could actually be a rich country if corruption was capped. But let me ask, Pauline, because now the people who are not corrupt or may not be corrupt are also at a disadvantage on social media. What's happened on social media in this race and in other places like
Actually,
this?
it's very inspiring what's happening in Pasig because what JC said earlier, we actually saw that translate to social media.
Explain.
Because we, as JC mentioned earlier, Diskaya, uses traditional
Galing ng sinabi niya, trapo daw.
Yes, trapo.
Traditional politician.
Trapo behaviors and strategies. And we saw that actually because we noticed that there were suspicious accounts on Facebook supporting Diskaya, and
what do you mean by suspicious?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
we
push you.
see suspicious accounts. We mean suspicious accounts by they're their comments are kind of similar, but not entirely.
Looking cut and paste.
Yes, but not entirely because
Not entirely.
they're kind of more sophisticated now,
Okay.
actually. But their grammar is almost perfect, almost all of them. And then when we look into their individual accounts, many of them are friends with each other. Some of them have less than 10 friends. So that's suspicious. And then when we look at their previous posts, they were posting about events in Tarlac, I think. So,
Yes.
so that's really far away from Pasig. So,
So
if you're a citizen from Pasig, why are you posting about Tarlac? So that's kind of a sign for us also. And then we compare that to the supporters of Vico Soto, and we saw that they were more organic because they were defending Soto in their own words, and then when we look at their accounts, they look authentic in the sense that they have, the normal number of friends. Their posts were varied. It's not about just politics or just a particular area. And so I think what's happening in Pasig is it's unique because it's very different from what we've been, monitoring all these years in terms of disinformation.
Interesting, but that's called a sock puppet network, right?
Yes,
When it's inauthentic. Yeah, John.
No, I just wanted to say something else about Vico Soto. In 2019, he was newly elected mayor.
Yes.
He spoke to my class, and he shared with us one very important lesson he learned in his first 100 days. When he took office, he said, I'm not a trapo. I'm not gonna do what other politicians are doing. Like 3 months into his first term, he met constituents who said, Mayor, anong ginagawa niyo? We don't know what you're doing. He realized that if you're a purist and say I'm not gonna communicate what I'm doing.
Oh my God, he
people,
has to.
People will still feel the effects and so on. And in real life, it doesn't work that way. So 100 days into his first term, he realized he needed to communicate better. So of course, he's still not doing the the railings with the S sign or whatever. But he knows how to communicate, and he has some very interesting posts, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna add what Vico does well online. I think he saw this from previous disinformation attacks on similar politicians. He actually fights back against disinformation. So when he sees fake information about him, he goes online and then he debunks them personally. So I think that's really needed for someone who's been constantly attacked, so that people won't think that because this is what we always see. This is what's true.
I think he had like a 45-day countdown or something on his social media.
Yeah.
When the election period, the campaign period for local offices started, so he had at least one post every day. Usually it would be debunking something or explaining something that he's done.
So it's interesting. So he didn't want to put his name connected to what
Yes, because he thought,
taxpayers deserve, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And yet we have one of the top senatorial in the surveys who is synonymous with malasakit centers, right? Like, how do you determine what will win and what will not if you're the candidate that's there, right? Like, how far do you go in putting your face next to a...
I think Vico Soto will feel uncomfortable if we talk of him as a real subversive, because he is really subverting decades of political tradition.
Right.
What Bongo is doing, other politicians on the national and local levels have done.
Yes.
They associate themselves, they brand themselves with
Ayuda. With whatever help,
that's
right?
Yeah. So you have this politician who is trying to educate his constituents, and hopefully, other constituencies can also learn from that. But he's very much going against the grain. More people. I mean, just having those. What's this? For example, construction, and then it's brought to you by or whatever, sponsored by.
Yes.
I mean,
or the sacks of rice that have their names on it.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the political tradition that is more prevalent, and I think that's what he's fighting against.
Wow. Any other thoughts as in this transition, right? It feels like you have to be Don Quixote against the windmills, right? But he did win. He did win, right?
Yes. He was very straightforward with the fact that he was a celebrity.
Yeah.
He said, I'm not going to. Yes, my parents are famous. People know me because of my parents, and I accept that. But that's just the first step for me. I'd like to use my celebrity as a platform. So I thought it was very. Well, he's very
Yes,
candid. Also,
yes.
I think that's the way to do it. It doesn't mean that if you're a celebrity, then you shouldn't be in Philippine politics. The problem is when we bring celebrification to politics, right? I mean, when we turn
Yes.
politics into entertainment. So that's
Yes.
what Sarah Vizcaya is doing, right?
Yes, yes.
Massive. But of course, she's not the only one.
No,
I've been to
no.
rallies where I remember Jambi Madrigal in 2004 promising people in Lipa, if I win, I'm gonna come back with Juday. And it's like, and people would clap, and it's like, okay, so there is that there is that entertainment factor, but it doesn't mean that entertainers are disqualified.
No, not at all.
Yeah, not at all.
But let me ask you, as we move forward, earlier you talked about doubting whether voters have agency, right? What do you mean by that?
I think we should be open to the idea that part of the information environment is polluted, and perhaps polluted in ways that we are not yet able to monitor or understand. So I'm even myself when I vote, I should be open to the possibility that maybe what I know about this particular person or this particular party. It's very interesting that it's been how many minutes, and this is the first time we're talking about political parties. Which shows how irrelevant they are.
Yes.
But we should be open to the possibility that what we might know is actually the fruit of a toxic tree, so polluted. So there. So I'm looking at. So I'm from Mindanao, and I can understand the appeal of the Dutertes. Partly it's regionalistic.
Yeah.
Yay, first
Yes,
president
yes,
from
yes,
Mindanao,
yes, yes.
and so on. Maybe we'll get a second with Sarah. But I think partly it's also there's also disinformation.
Yes.
There we many people in Mindanao see Duterte through a filter.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't realize that it's a filter, right? So
How interesting. Pauline, the impact, we've talked a lot about this. You've looked at elections in other parts of the world. I remember Kenya. I remember Canada, Australia. I mean, what's been the impact of information operations on elections?
Right. They have the power actually to manipulate the results. For example, in Romania, we've talked about this earlier. They found evidence that there was a Russian interference there, and so they voided the elections. But also, I would also like to say that disinformation also has the power to translate into real-world violence. For example, in the U.S., if you remember the Capitol riot, it started on Facebook, right?
Yes.
And then it turned into a whole violent riot on the ground with many people injured. Another thing in the UK, it's not related to the elections, but the Southport attacks.
Yes.
It started in a small place called Southport, and then disinformation against immigrants cropped up at the onset of that event, and then it blew up on social media and on Telegram, and then people flocked to the streets actually to protest immigrants in the UK. And so I think really social media has the power to accelerate anything. It could be real information, but most often than not, it's disinformation, because disinformation, fuels your emotions. It gets shared more often because people react more to it as compared to just pure information.
And what's the most recent finding? I mean, we talked about this, and I saw the report from ABC Australia talking about how generative AI,
Right.
large language models, are being manipulated. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I watched that clip from ABC Australia. So basically, what they found was that there's this network from Russia who made a number of I would say news blogs, news sites. That contains pro-Russia propaganda, and then they feed that to generative AI LLMs such as ChatGPT, Gemini. Yeah, and as you know, LLMs, machine learning models, are just as good as the data it consumes, and so. Once they kept feeding these LLMs these false information, it gets shared to the people who are using them. And from that clip from ABC Australia, they said that there is 1 in 6 chances that the LLM would repeat the disinformation. But if you take that to the US, that chance actually grows to 1 into 3.
One third of
chances.
LLMs of OpenAI are disinformation. This particular one was Pravda, a fake news site, right? Or maybe not fake, because Pravda wouldn't call itself fake. But
Propaganda.
it is definitely propaganda news site. And you mentioned January 6. I always thought January 6, 2021 was when Silicon Valley sins came home to roost. We looked at that and then saw those people getting arrested and talked about rule of law. Look, their U.S. institutions are still working. But President Trump just pardoned all of them in one of his first executive orders.
Something that he promised, yeah.
Something that he promised to do. I mean, how does all of this impact democracy? I mean, we're seeing democracy globally shifting, right?
It is definitely under threat. So I think the human nature that's behind this, it's been around for a long time, right? So what social media has done has amplified that. So I'm reminded of something that this American journalist Walter Lippmann wrote in the 1920s when he talked about how public opinion is shaped, and he said there are 2 factors. There's an intensification of feeling, and there's a degradation of significance. Meaning, so you amplify emotional outrage and so on, but the degradation of significance is that you remove all possible nuance. So if you want to go to war against another country, right? You stoke people's outrage, but also just simplify the issue, right? So I mean that works. That's human nature. What social media has done is
put it on steroids,
accelerated it to such an extent that. We might not be able to stop it once it's started. So I think that's the problem, and that's why it's a threat to democracy.
Great, we hold that. We're coming back to you. I especially want to talk about the impact both on justice and on the Pope, on the new Pope. Right now, let's go to back to the elections and the voting that's ongoing. So far, everything's still smooth. This is a report from mover Vince Manlogon, who talked about the smooth voting experience in Quezon Province.
Vince Armel Manlogon, Rappler mover from Quezon. So kasalukuyan ako nandito ngayon sa Quezon Elementary School na kung saan ay isinasagawa ang pagboto ng mga botante dito sa poblasyon ng aming bayan. So kaninang umaga inaabutan ko pa na nandun isang kanto mula rito ang mga kandidato sa pagkakonsyal na sana Eleuterio Lim Jr., Arlene Carino at Myla Bayan. Ganon din ay nandun din sa labas ang mga uniform personnel, ang PNP at BFP na kung saan ay sila ang nagsisilbing help desk sa mga botanteng mga kailangan ng tulong. Kanina ay nagtanong ako sa mga botante na nakaboto na at ayon sa kanila ay maayos naman ang daloy ng eleksyon or kanilang pagboto. At wala namang masyadong problema pagdating sa mga machines. At ganoon din, sa loob, tinanong ko kung sino yung mga tao na nasa loob at bukod daw sa mga guro at tauhan ng COMELEC ay nandun din ang mga watchers ng mga kandidato gaya ng watchers ni na tumatakbong muli na sa pagmayor na si Crispin Clasio at re-electionist na si Juan Jan Escolano. So meron din sa loob na watcher mula sa 4K party list. So kung papansin ninyo, patuloy ang paglabas at pagpasok ng mga botante na magkakas ng kanilang votes. At para sa more information, mag-tune lang at i-follow ang aming page na Rappler at mag-subscribe sa aming communities app. So once again, Wins Armel Manlogon, Rappler mover from Quezon, Quezon.
Fantastic. Joining us live is Rappler's justice reporter, Jairo Boledo, who is now in Davao. Sara Duterte has just had a press conference. What can you tell us about what she said?
Yes, Maria. After she cast her vote in a school here in Davao City, Sara Duterte held her press conference in front of local media and the national media. She talked about a lot of things. She talked about her experience in the elections. She said na smooth naman ang kanyang naging pagboto except doon sa nagkaroon ng anomalya the person before her, pero other than that wala naman siya naging question, wala naman siyang naging reklamo on the conduct of the polls. She also talked about talking to her father about the ICC case, and she said that she just talked to her father to discuss the case, and she promised her father to focus on the ICC case once the elections are over. Maria, isa sa mga interesting na sinabi kanina ni Sara Duterte ay syempre tinanong natin if the former president was able to vote, and that's the question of many people, not just in Davao but also in the national scale. And unfortunately, according to Sara, her father was not able to vote because hindi siya enrolled sa any exception, sa any special voting mechanism na inaalaw ng ating batas. So, hindi nakaboto si Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Another point that Vice President Sara Duterte talked about was the political dynasties. It's interesting because in Davao, there are 5 Dutertes running for political posts, and sabi ni Sara Duterte ay siya ay against sa political dynasties. Reporters followed up on that note, and she said herself that meron siyang moral ascendancy to talk about it because she herself is from a political dynasty. At ang sabi niya, hindi natin sure kung seryoso ba siya dito kasi alam naman natin ang mga Dutertes ay hindi talaga sila clear with their stances. But ang sabi niya, if she is given the chance to draft the bill on the political dynasty, ay willing siya na mag-volunteer. And the 1987 Constitution clearly states that political dynasties are not allowed under the Constitution, but ang laging sinasabi dito ng mga mambabatas ay wala daw implementing law, but other experts disagree. And that's on the political dynasty. And the last part, Maria, is on the PDP laban. Sabi ni Sara Duterte ay nag-inform siya sa kanyang tatay na si Rodrigo Duterte. She forwarded names of the Senate slate that she thinks na may chance dito sa 2025 elections. Tinanong natin siya, anong naging basis niya doon sa mga pangalan na sa tingin niya may chance from the slate ng kanyang tatay? At ang sabi niya ay iba't ibang mga surveys daw na kinandak at even yung mga personal surveys na kinandak ng PDP Laban, which is the national political party of former President Duterte. Sabi ni Sara, there are more than 2 names na finorward niya doon sa kanyang ama. At ang sabi niya rin, kanina ay in-explain niya rin yung choice niya sa pagpili to endorse Amy Marcos, who is the sister of former President Ferdinand Marcos. At ang sabi niya ay iba daw si Amy kay Marcos at nagpasaring din siya na si Amy daw ay nagtatrabaho samantalang si Marcos ay hindi. Alam niyo, importante, Maria, yung talagang endorsement from the Davao region because in Davao City alone, merong 1 million voters and ang Davao region ang isa, if not the biggest. Ito ang pinaka-vote-rich na region sa buong Mindanao with 3 million votes at dito lang mismo sa bailiwick ng mga Dutertes, solid 1 million votes na yan. So it's really important for national candidates to court itong mga Dutertes who have the bailiwick and who have the control over Davao City. Maria?
Jairo, balikan natin. Medyo hindi malinaw sa akin yung sinabi mo tungkol dun sa sagot ni Sara Duterte sa Dynasty. Sinabi niya sa kampo na kasama siya, memorial high ground siya na magsabig dahil galing siya sa Dynasty. Pero, anong sinabi niya tungkol sa Dynasties? Because you talked about how it was also illegal.
Maria, tinanong din natin yan kasi out of the blue na mention niya yon yung political dynasties. Nung sinabi namin sa kanya, what do you mean by you're against political dynasties? Ang sabi niya, pinapaalalahanan niya daw ang mga voters sa Davao City and on the national scale na wag na basta-basta bumoto ng mga kandidato na mula sa political dynasties. She said that voters should look beyond surnames. Even if Duterte pa yan, ay dapat tingnan kung kwalipikado ba, kung maganda ba ang qualifications ng kandidato na yon bago piliin yon. So nag-follow up kami, Maria, if siya ba ay nakausap niya ba ang family niya about it. At ang sabi niya ay hindi pa siya naka-clarify yung stance niya na yon sa family niya at never niyang na-clarify kung pabor ba sila doon sa stand mismo na yon ni Duterte. But what's clear is personal stance niya daw yon as the Vice President and as herself as Sara Duterte, Maria.
Fascinating, Jairo. Question. Of course, at stake in these elections, Duterte versus Marcos, it's interesting she'll talk about dynasty, I guess referring to Marcos, right? But what's really at stake here is Sara Duterte's political future. Did she talk about this at all? The impeachment trial against her and the makeup of the Senate that will be her jury.
What she mentioned was, ang sabi niya ay yung fate and destiny. Kanina medyo pumunta siya doon sa ganung conversation na what's written daw in her fate and destiny will happen. So that's really an interesting take on what's happening on ground. Knowing that Sara Duterte is a lawyer, she tends to be critical, she tends to be specific, logical, and specific on details. But kanina sinabi niya na fate and destiny daw ang magdidikta sa kung saan at ano ang mangyayari sa kanya, referring to the impeachment. Pero tinanong din natin siya about the impeachment, na yung mga legal na mga kinakaharap nilang mag-anak, ang sabi nila ay pinapaubayan na raw nila sa lawyer nila yon. So, yun yung naging sagot niya kanina regarding the impeachment.
Jairo, interesting lang kung nakita natin yung kind of effect nung the disinformation and the reaction to the Duterte arrest seemed to be petering down the closer we got to election day. What's the mood like there? Are you going to see the kinds of surveys that had come out earlier?
Maria, kanina habang after nung live natin, nag-ikot-ikot ako dito to get the mood of the people. Tinatanong ko sila casually, not on cam, kung sino ang kanilang mga sinusuportahan. They cannot really tell. May mga tao na nagsasabi na malakas daw si Nograles, may mga tao na nagsasabi na yung mga Dutertes daw ang malakas. So even the people are not really sure about the results of the Davao City elections. But I talked to one of local journalists here at ang sabi niya ay isa lang yung malinaw. Hindi natin alam kung sino yung mananalo. Pero ang malinaw dito ay isa to, if not, the tightest race ever na kinaharap ng mga Duterte dito locally dahil doon sa mga binabangga nilang pangalan and syempre yung kamada o yung kapangyarihan ng makinarya, yung suporta ng national elections or national candidates down to the local candidates. So yun yung naging observations ng mga tao doon. Kanina after our coverage with Sara Duterte, we also talked to mayoral candidate Carlo Nograles na bumoto dito mismo sa Palma Hill Elementary School. Tinanong din natin siya sa tingin niya anong chances niya. Si Carlo din hindi siya makapagbigay ng kanyang chance, safe yung sagot niya. Ang sabi niya lang ay naniniwala siya na mahirap mag-gauge kung sino ang mananalo, kung sino ang nakalalabang sapagkat may mga tinatawag siyang silent voters dito sa Davao City. At sa tingin natin, at sa messaging ni Carlo at sa messaging niya noong mga nakaraan pa, he is banking on that quote-unquote silent voters of Davao City and he is banking on his strategy to provide his platforms-based campaign dito sa mga taga Davao.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jairo. That's Jairo Boledo reporting live from Davao. Fascinating. You have to say it. I promised we would go to the Pope because in the middle of all of this, after the arrest of our former president, I really did have to say, while I was in different parts of the world, as I still have to ask for permission to travel from the Supreme Court, but I'm not in jail. President Duterte is. I guess the question here is, in the middle of all of this, we had the Pope. What was important? I mean, the Philippines is Asia's largest Roman Catholic nation. We had Chito Tagle as one of the. We had 5 cardinals, but 3 who were part of the conclave. Yeah. What's important about this? The Pope.
First of all, it provides a contrast how we should vote. Cardinals, the entire structure of voting, you have to put yourself in the right frame of mind. You have to make a solemn commitment. You have to follow, the dictates of the Holy Spirit, right? So, and the way it's structured is that there are general congregations leading up to the conclave where you get to see who's doing well. You can ask questions and so on. So you can see that there's great deliberation when it comes to this. And I think what they're really after is to choose the person who's best qualified in their view. I'm not sure if we can say that in many of the voting precincts right now. Again, partly because for the longest time, we really just want to vote for people who will take care of us if something happens to us. Gusto natin yung mga malakas. Ayaw natin yung mga mahihina. No? So that would be one thing. But I think also that maybe it wasn't explicit, but there was a need to provide a counter figure to Donald Trump. I think in the same way that in 1978 there was a need to for a Pope John Paul II to emerge, to serve as a counter figure to the Soviet Union and what was happening in the Warsaw Pact countries. I don't know if this was again explicit, but I think that they felt the need to, in a way, push back. I don't want to be misinterpreted. It wasn't a political decision. I think it was seeing the role of the church as a source of moral authority.
Yes.
So
at a time when morality seems to be, when lies are more important or get you further than the truth.
So I as a believer, I think that there was that consideration that went into this. You can see the difference. I saw the press conference held by the Filipino cardinal electors and the press conference conducted by the American cardinal electors. And you can see the difference. I mean, the Americans, they were more forthcoming about helping people see Cardinal Prevost in a different light.
Yeah.
They themselves did not consider him as American because he spent his church career outside.
He's a dual citizen, actually.
And he's a dual citizen of the United States and Peru. But you can see that they were talking in these terms. That they were talking to other people about Cardinal Prevost. But Cardinal Tagle, Cardinal Ambo, and Cardinal Advincola, they were all. They weren't political at all. I thought the American electors were very close to being political.
Well, Pope Leo specifically also talked about many of the same priorities as Pope Francis.
That's right.
Including artificial intelligence. Sorry, you have to know I will pull that out, right?
Sure,
was that a surprise? Artificial intelligence from the new Pope?
A bit, because artificial intelligence is fairly new, but not really because I heard that Pope Leo was close with Pope Francis, right? And so I would assume that they talked about it even in their chats. But what I would say is that I think it's good that he's acknowledging it and that he's raising, alarms about
what was going on online in the Philippines during that time period?
During the election of the
Conclave,
Oh, we've seen many comments on YouTube supporting Tagle. as the potential new pope. But we've also seen narratives saying that I'm a Filipino, but I don't want Tagle to win because Tagle is a political cardinal. He keeps meddling with the politics.
Interesting.
Yeah, but there were few. There were few.
Also smear campaigns against him.
Right. I've heard that there were rumors going around that he was a billionaire, apparently, and that he was gambling.
That he would
This is why
gamble in Macau
yeah.
casinos.
The conclave actually was quite political, if you think about it.
I think Cardinal
That's right.
Tagle actually addressed that.
They addressed that in the press
during the
conference.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's right. Unfortunately, I see that as American politics being applied, American cultural politics being applied to the conclave as well. I think the source for that
Smear campaign.
smear campaign that he gambles in Macau casinos. First of all, it's very easy to double check, right? How often is he in Macau? Has he even been in Macau? But it appeared in the extreme right or the
It was.
anti-Francis.
Yeah. Including
French.
him singing Imagine. Do you remember this? The atheist. But before we leave, I mean, we have to talk about the Philippines and the geopolitical power shifts that are happening now and what these elections may do for that, right? In terms of China, in terms of the government's position. We're halfway through a Marcos administration. President Marcos reversed President Duterte's position
Pivot to China, yeah.
and pivoted, right, back to the United States, I think. What's at stake depending on what happens?
Well, I was being playful earlier when you asked me, how important are these elections? What are they? What's the importance? And I said, are they in fact important? Of course, they are important. And one of the consequential things is, are we going to have enough votes to impeach Sara Duterte? Why is that related to the China question?
Correct.
Because I think that is the quickest way for a repivot to China. If Sara Duterte were to become president in 2028, I think that her family would readily follow their father's footsteps. So one of the consequences of this election would there be enough? No? So Amy Marcos will definitely vote against the impeachment of Sara Duterte. That's one of the considerations, I think.
Yes.
So she's going. And this, I don't think this is related to the impeachment. Amy Marcos is not doing so well. I mean, she's like 12 or 13 and 14 because people can't. Well, I guess people can't make up their minds. Are you pro Marcos with your family name and your history, or are you pro Duterte? I mean, it's difficult. It's like Francis Tolentino or even Abalos. There is no compelling narrative or single narrative about them. So to go back to the question about China, it will have to revolve around the question of will there be enough votes to impeach Sara Duterte? Then we'll see whether we're looking at a second Duterte presidency.
Something else happened, though, leading up to these elections at the end of last year, going into this year. Alice Guo, to find a Chinese national elected to office in the Philippines, and then Rappler did a series on the intelligence agents that are working in the Philippines. What does this show us?
I think it would be naive of us to not see China's hand in this. We should, as President Rodrigo Duterte invited us all those years ago, we should take a look at the map, right?
Yes.
And we can see, just looking at the map, we're obviously within the sphere of influence of China. Unfortunately, our borders are porous.
Yeah.
So you have all sorts of disinformation actors, spies, right? We've had stories about spies being caught and so on. So definitely, they are any enemy, any adversary would take the opportunity to shape the information environment preparatory to launching something. I'm sure that's happening in Taiwan, for instance.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So manipulating the information environment there. The same thing is happening here.
coming back to you on China right after we have now live is Michelle Abad, covers the Commission on Elections, or COMELEC. Michelle is at the New Bilibid prison. What do you have for us, Michelle?
Hi, Maria. Yeah, I'm here in the New Bilibid prison in Muntinlupa City, but I've actually been on the field since around 5 a.m. I've been following the chairman of the Commission on Elections, George Garcia, for the entire day. So I'll just give a recap as well of what I went through until I got here. So at 5 a.m., we were at Silang. So it was the start of the early voting period. So I'm sure what some of my other colleagues have told you about that part where there are senior citizens, persons with disabilities, pregnant women who do get priority in voting. And so, it was a quiet morning. There were different reasons for why there were priority groups that were coming in. Some of them, it was because of their jobs. Some of them was because they wanted to not go vote under the heat of the sun, where now it's very, very hot. And some of them, I guess in the context of Silang and Cavite, the chairman said that a lot of them were going there early because many of the voters were actually farm workers. So they had to go and tend to their farms, even if today is a working holiday for most of us in maybe in private establishments or corporate businesses, the farm workers had to go in. And so we did have we did observe a smooth experience there. After Silang, we went to a few other schools, voting centers in Cavite province. And, I'm sure a lot of my other colleagues have also reported the regularities of the sample ballots, but I think it might have been, the fact that we had the COMELEC chairman with us and a lot of security presence that we didn't see as much of that. And in the eyes of COMELEC reporters, things were smooth. But of course, that's probably what you would expect from the COMELEC chairman, who's actually going around and checking on on voting in different areas, that the COMELEC would have their best foot forward and make sure that nothing is actually caught on camera while the chairman is there. So that's what I saw this morning from those different voting centers in Cavite. We went here to the New Bilibid prison to check on our persons who are deprived of liberty, or the PDLs who are casting their votes today as well. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was the result of a Supreme Court ruling which allowed them to vote even if they are behind bars. So they do get to exercise their vote from the localities of which they are registered. I think there has to be some kind of arrangements if they want to vote from here in this area in Muntinlupa. But as far as I know, they are entitled to vote for where they are registered. And so I was actually there earlier. I wanted to come to you live, but there is a signal jammer here because we are in a prison.
Yeah.
Were you going to ask something? Yeah.
Yeah, Michelle, these are the first time the Philippines is using these machines. Any major problems hitting the commissioner?
Oh, yeah, because there are lots and lots of reports that are coming in of failures, irregularities. There are people who are wondering about the priority polling places where in the rooms where the seniors and the PWDs are supposed to go, there's not always a machine there that you should put your ballot in, and then they have to bring them upstairs to where they're actually registered. So people were wondering why that was the style. And when the COMELEC chairman was asked about it, he said that that's how it works. But if they have the ability to get up and go up to the second floor and put the ballots into the counting machines themselves, then they're welcome to do that. But I think it's just a matter of awareness building and voters information, that everybody or a lot of people were shocked by some of the processes today because it was not disseminated earlier properly.
So more on the logistics, but the machines are operating okay.
So far, that's what we're seeing, and some allegations of the source code discrepancies, which are some of them are legitimate, some of them also might be ways to just try and discredit the COMELEC. But in either way, the COMELEC does have a lot of things to respond to as of this morning.
What about the overseas voters?
Mm-hmm.
Are they...
Maria, it's good you asked that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because actually in like 30 minutes, at 12 noon Philippine time, the pre-enrollment for overseas voters who are participating in internet voting will end. And that was already the second extension. Just to reorient our viewers, there are 1.22 million Filipinos overseas who are expected to participate in the overseas election via internet voting. And that's the first time that we're ever doing that. And they are supposed to pre-enroll before they actually partake in the system. And what is actually sad is, as of around yesterday or a day ago, when they extended the pre-enrollment period, it was just around 240,000 voters out of the 1.22 that are expected to join. So you can imagine that's just enrollment. Like, we don't even know how many of those voted yet. So even though the COMELEC tried to put the system in to boost turnout, we have yet to see if the opposite might actually happen.
Michelle, in the past, I remember covering this all the way to 1986. Guns, goons, and gold, right? Those three things. Election violence seems to have been lower than normal. Is that the same? Has the COMELEC commission, has the COMELEC chief gotten many more reports of election violence? As of before May 1, it was 35 election-related incidents, 13 dead ahead of the polls.
Yeah, that's right, Maria. There are some certain election-related incidents that have been reported by the Philippine National Police, but according to COMELEC Chairman George Garcia, it's actually not as rampant now, at least relative to the 2022 elections and the 2019 elections. Right. So relatively, even if we do have pockets of violence in certain areas, they aren't as high as recent elections.
That's so interesting. That was the same thing that I was thinking, because it used to be our midterm elections were more violent because you had private armed groups clashing against each other. And gosh, I remember deaths of 200 and below was considered peaceful, right? Now we have 13. That's a dramatic shift. But what about vote buying? Guns, goons, gold. What about the gold?
Right.
What about those reports?
Yeah, so actually there have been a lot of allegations of vote buying, especially leading up to the elections. And we just spoke to COMELEC Chairman Garcia yesterday about the latest data. And from what I recall, the chairman said as of yesterday, there were about 500 incidents that were reported to them of vote buying. So they do have this committee, and it's called this Committee on Contrabigay. So this is a committee in the COMELEC that's focused solely on cracking down on vote buying. And so it's an election offense. And but what's interesting is, like, even though vote buying is, I also heard from one of my colleagues earlier that it's kind of become, unfortunately, normalized in Philippine elections. But what's interesting is that nobody has been convicted of vote buying. What has been more of the convictions is the abuse of state resources, which I guess is easier to prove and prove in court. But when it comes to vote buying, it seems that it's very difficult for our Philippine authorities to come to convictions.
Wow, fantastic. Michelle, we'll come back to you. We hope the day stays as peaceful, or relatively peaceful, as you've had it. We'll come back to you in the coming hours. Thanks so much. Back to China.
Right.
What does it look like online leading up to elections and now?
Right. So as I've mentioned before, when we tracked the pro-China communities on Facebook, we found that these were actually made up of pro-Duterte supporters, pro-Duterte accounts.
So it's exactly what
Sir John said. Yeah. And so I agree that these elections have a lot at stake right now, because I don't think many people realize that what's happening next is the impeachment of Sara. And when the impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte was announced, I think that was back in January, we did also a scan with the nerve, and we found that despite all the allegations against her, like her father, she also has a strong supporter base. They quickly came to her support, and they kept posting these comments, protect VP Sara. From what I'm not sure, but they kept making her appear like the victim of all of this. And when we connect that to what we have found earlier in our earlier reports, we can see, that these very same supporters who are very vocal in supporting Vice President Sara Duterte online, they are also the same online accounts who are talking positively about China. Yeah.
How interesting. John, your thoughts on in terms of this shifting geopolitical world right now? I mean, essentially, the United States seems to have taken many of Russia's positions, and China and the tariff war between the two biggest economies, and little Philippines kind of smack in the middle of all of it.
I'm reminded of something I saw on Twitter. We're living in interesting times, the tweet said. We have an American Pope and a Russian president. So yes, I think we're looking at the beginning of the post-American order. I think that, for instance, in Europe, this is very much the reality that they've acknowledged. It's very interesting that Zelensky had a summit meeting with. So I found out that this is now they're calling it the Potsdam Triangle. France, Germany, and Poland are working very closely together.
Yeah.
So, for instance, when the new German Chancellor Merz took office, he visited Poland the same day, and the next day France. So they're consolidating this so-called Potsdam Triangle, and with the help of the UK, that would be the fourth member. So these four met with Zelensky, and I think they've come to terms. Yes, they've come to terms with the fact that we are looking at the post-American order. The Philippines needs to think strategically.
Yes.
What does it mean for us? We've outsourced our external defense to the United States military for all practical purposes. What does that mean if suddenly Donald Trump says, "No, I don't want to go to war in the Asia Pacific"? I mean, that's so we need some real thinking about that. At the same time, I don't think China is the is the cure to what we're right. I mean, it's so. I think we need to develop closer ties with Japan, with Australia, with South Korea, maybe with India. But I think it's going to be a very tumultuous next few years for us.
Yeah, it's super fascinating because so far Southeast Asia, the global South, has been largely quiet. Europe and the shifts in the global North are shifting, and we've seen the elections in Canada and Australia. And we'll come back for your last thoughts, but let's move from Baguio. Multiple automated counting machines have been malfunctioning since 5 a.m. Mover Jojo Thayer files this report.
Hello, Jose Emmanuel Thayer reporting for Rappler here at Baguio City. So currently we are at a clustered voting precinct here at Luwakan Elementary School, where there have already been reports of malfunctioning automated counting machines as early as 5 in the morning. So as you can see right here behind me, that there is already a long line of people waiting to cast in their ballots. So according to interviews from poll watchers and volunteers here in the precincts, is that the malfunctioned ACMs have already been repaired and continued their operations despite the delays. Once again, reporting for Rappler, Jose Emmanuel Thayer, Rappler, Baguio City.
In San Roque, Camarines Norte, voters struggle to locate their precincts. Find your precincts. And some ballots were rejected by the automated counting machines. Mover Paulo Cotauco files this report.
Unang oras ng eleksyon dito sa San Roque Elementary School sa Mercedes, Camarines Norte ay tila may palaro dito sa presinto. Hindi ito laro ng lahi, kundi hanapan ng pangalan. Halos magkanda-ugaga ang mga botante sa bawat polling precincts upang mahanap nila ang kanilang mga pangalan dahil karamihan ng residente ay nananatiling inaasahan ang physical list of voters na nakapaskil sa labas ng mga polling precincts kaysa sa online public precinct finder. Sabi ng mga iilang Bicolano ay nagyayamot na dahil sa init ng panahon at nais nang makaboto ng mabilis. Merong security guard ang pumila na maaga para makaboto dahil may duty pa ito. Napayagan naman siya ng mga nakapilang boboto pero sabi ng electoral board sa kanya ay walang priority sa mga frontliners at kailangan pumila pa rin kahit na malilate na siya sa trabaho. Sabi ng head ng electoral board na si Leonardo Lucio ay hindi priority ang security guard na nais makaboto ng maaga dahil mayroong priority voting para sa mga buntis, PWD at mga nakakatanda na nagsimula na kanina pang 5 a.m. Ngunit lahat ng mga tao except sa mga nabanggit ay kailangan pumila pa rin dahil ayon sa kanya ay walang special treatment. Kaninang 7:02 a.m., 2 minuto nang nakaraan nang nagsimula na ang eleksyon, para sa lahat ay nagkaroon ng 15-minute power interruption. Ngunit ayon sa electoral board ay hindi naapektuhan ang pagboto dahil merong backup battery ang ACM. May natala ring 10 hanggang 15 na balota na ang nailuwa o di tinanggap ng mga automated counting machines. Isa na dito ay napunit na ang balota dahil pinilit na ipasok sa ACM. Dahil dito, binigyan muli ng balota ang botante upang makaboto habang tinago na lang sa maayos na lugar ang napunit na balota. Reporting for Rappler, this is Paulo Cotalco. Rappler reporting from Mercedes, Camarines Norte.
It's almost 12 noon. Voting continues. More than 18,000 posts up and a record number of registered voters, 68.4 million. It's up more than a million from the 2022 elections. Let's go to your final thoughts. I mean, we talk about the midterm elections, you know, in easy terms, and we go down to the details, but this is happening during very dangerous times, both in terms of tech and in terms of geopolitical power. Your last thoughts, what should we be thinking about as we head to the polls?
I think it would be stretched to ask Filipino voters to go to the precincts and think about, you know, China and geopolitics, right? There might be a few who will think, yeah, there might be a few who will think along those lines, but nevertheless, we should stress the importance. As I said earlier, we are still navigating our way through the beginnings of a post-American order. What does that mean for us, Filipinos? Just to give one example, for instance, our military strategy is still focused on the communist insurgency, which I understand from Rear Admiral Ong was as early as 2014 already considered. We're essentially done, right? So really, the need is for the last 10 years, is to focus on external defense. But again, we've outsourced our external defense to the United States. So what does that mean now? So we need to do some fancy footwork. But again, I don't think anyone will go there. Very few will go there and have that in mind. And I guess we can only encourage our voters to vote for political leaders who would have some clarity about what's happening around the world, and also the courage to act in the right way.
Pauline, your last thoughts.
So I kept thinking about our previous coverage in the 2022 elections, and I think what's really changed right now is the role of generative AI. Because before, we kept on talking about, you know, the disinformation that we saw on social media, the echo chambers, all that, and then we kept on asking for accountability from social media platforms, which we still haven't gotten.
Which we never got.
Now. And, and right now, it's not just social media platforms. We have generative AI along with that, and of course, we will keep on asking for accountability, even though we haven't seen any similar things that they've seen in Australia, but it could be just a matter of time. So I think it's really awareness that these types of tech are being manipulated by bad forces. I'm not saying that these technological advancements are all bad, because we do have our AI chatbot. It's called Rai. Actually, you can use that in our app, but it's in the intent of the users, of the developers, of how they use those kinds of technology, and also the accountability part. If these technological advancements cause harm, then who pays for it?
Correct. Yes. And we go back. That's been the spark that's shifted the world, right? We're going to be back We're going to be back. Thank you both, Pauline and John. This has been the 10 a.m. edition of Rappler's coverage of the 2025 midterm elections. We're going to be back tonight at 6 p.m. Stay tuned for Community Head Pia Ranada. Thank you for joining us. Again, thank you, John Neri, Pauline Macareig, for your invaluable insights. I'm Maria Ressa. Thank you for joining us.
First-time voter ka ba o feeling first-timer? Don't skip this, para sa'yo to. Eleksyon na sa darating na Lunes, May 12. Ibig sabihin, oras na para maghalal ng mga susunod na mga leader na uupo sa Senado, Kongreso at lokal na mga konseho. Pero FYI ha, isa lang ang balota mo. Bawal magkamali ibig sabihin, but don't worry, we got you. Sundan tong 6-step by the step process para sumaksas ka sa pagboto ngayong darating na eleksyon. Step 1, choose your fighter. Sino bang iboboto mo muna? Ilista sa papel or sa notes app ng phone mo ang mga pangalan na sashadan mo sa balota. Para sa mga national positions, pwede kang bumoto ng hanggang 12 senators at isang party list group. Sa lokal naman, meron kang tig-isang boto para sa mga posisyon na ito. Kailangan nyo ring bumoto ng ilang mga kandidato para sa sangguniang panlalawigan at sangguniang panglungsod o bayan. Check our election website para malaman kung sino-sino ang mga tumatakbo. Nga pala, pwedeng mag-undervote o hindi kumplituhin yung boto mo. Kunwari, 10 lang for senators o wala naman para sa congressman. Okay lang yon. Huwag ka lang susobra sa dapat na bilang ng boto. Nakalagay sa balota kung hanggang ilan ang pwede mong i-shade. Take note, kesa naman masayang at ma-invalidate yung vote mo. Step 2. Alamin kung saan ka boboto. Bisitahin ang Precinct Finder website para malaman kung saan ka naka-assign. Open ang mga presinto mula 7 a.m. hanggang 7 p.m. Kung ikaw ay senior citizen, may kapansanan, buntis, o kasama ng mga kabilang sa mga priority groups na ito, may early voting period from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. For sure, mahaba ang pila sa botohan, kaya magbaon ng tubig, panyo, at mahabang pasensya. Step 3. Pumila para bumoto. Pagpasok ng botohan, tatanungin muna ng Electoral Board ang pangalan at precinct number mo. Tapos, i-check niya kung nasa listahan ka ng mga pwedeng bumoto at kung nakaboto ka na. Pagka-verify, saka lang ibibigay sa iyo ang balota mo, kasama ng secrecy folder at marking pen. Step 4. Markahan ng iyong balota para bumoto. Dapat maayos at buo ang shade ng mga bilog na katabi ng pangalan ng kandidato mo. Okay lang lumagpas ng kaunti sa bilog, basta hindi OA, nasakop pati yung ibang bilog. Pagkatapos bumoto, ilusot ang balota sa automated counting machine para ma-scan. Makikita mo sa touchscreen ng machine yung mga binoto mo. At saka may lalabas na resibo. Ngayon, pagkatapos, i-review kung tama yung data. Kapag may mali, i-report ka agad sa election inspector. Tandaan, ipinagbabawal ng election law na picture ng iyong balota o resibo. And last step, ibalik yung marker at folder. Magpalagay ng indelible ink, patunay na nakaboto ka na, and you're done. Success. Good luck, Filipinas!